to be with you. My name is Dr. Asa Lee, and I am one of the deans in the administration at Wesley Theological Seminary. Happy to be partnering with the AU School of Public Affairs to bring this conversation about. Just a quick reminder that closed captioning is available at the link in the chat. And for those of you who are on now, we are recording this, and so this is now being a part of the conversation. As you join in, you'll be muted. As we go along, there'll be some periods of question and conversation. I'll invite you to either place your question in the chat or unmute yourself and ask your question in that context, and then we can have a dialogue that way. So excited to be with you all in this conversation. I want to jump right in, and we'll begin with sort of a conversation about design thinking. Why design thinking? Well, because design thinking is a part of a creative framework, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But I want to look at design thinking as a way to unlock our creative potential and then apply that creative potential to our own journeys in life. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can jump right in. As for those of you who are just joining, we are now recording, and we're jumping right into our conversation with spirituality or design thinking and discernment. So we want this workshop to provide for you an opportunity to look at your life, look at yourself, look at your leadership, your skill sets in a different way. And we're going to do that in three parts. The first is sort of talking a bit about design thinking, particularly innovation and imagination. We'll do an exercise that will hopefully remind all of us of our creative potential, no matter what our line of work is. There's a difference between being artistic and being creative. And while all of us may not be necessarily artistic, all of us have creative potential. And so we want to use a bit of our creativity in this. And then we want to apply sort of design thinking principles, innovation, and imagination into our own lives as a way to think about discerning next steps for our life. So with that, let's get right into this here. And I apologize for the Prezi going back and forth. It'll make you seasick, but bear with me. So what's the problem? For some of us, I think it's fair to say that, you know, the old way of thinking about life meant that around your midlife points in your life journey, you know, when you're 40 or 50 years old or what have you, you'd have a life crisis, and you change careers, or you do something drastic, and then you come back to yourself or do something different. That is not necessarily true that it's crises are in life questioning is a midlife reality. It is actually a part of life. It happens at any stage of life. It can happen in your high school years. To say that a high schooler who's waiting for college admissions results to come back isn't having a life crisis is to deny the life of that 17 or 18-year-old. And so life crises and loss of direction and a sense of stagnancy are part and parcel of living. And all of us have those experiences. And regardless of the reasons, what I want to offer is not sort of an examination of the reasons why we have this sort of life questioning happening, but really that when we question our life, we should be questioning all aspects of it. The solutions that we come up with are not just logical. They aren't just a product of how much money can I make, or what's the best result of my leadership on this team, or can I do this and have the same lifestyle? Those are logical questions. They're important questions, but they're also the answers to those questions aren't just found employing logic. They are holistic. They involve logic, emotion, spirit, character, the fullness of your mind, the fullness of your body. And there too much of our lives have been sort of separated out. We've kind of parsed out different aspects of our life, so that logic is over here, emotion is over here, and that's just not how we are built as human beings. We're holistic, and so what we want to do in this workshop is in part employ a holistic approach to bringing in your imagination and your creativity to help you to facilitate and identify new ways of being in the world. So that's really what we want to do: address new challenges or just challenges with new ways of thinking and new ideas. So I'm going to borrow from a professor and a colleague, Dr. Matt Bloom, who is in the Notre Dame School of Business. And these next few ideas are from his thinking and his work around thriving at work and gifting and skill sets and the ways in which we as human beings employ human capital to make a difference in the world. So Matt Bloom has a definition of innovation, and that is innovation is are new ideas. Innovation is the name given to new ideas that make a positive difference. And innovation is different from imagination. My working definition of imagination is quite simply a projection of mental ideas into a new reality or a new potential reality. And so imagination is about dreaming and creating in the mind. You build on experiences to develop something that's never been seen before. It may be effective at solving problems, it may not be, but it's just simply a creation of yours. Innovation is taking that idea and applying it in a way that, taking that imaginative idea and applying it in a way that impacts change, at least by melding my definition with Matt Bloom's. And again, here's the seasick Prezi, sorry about that. Matt Bloom argues that we're not in the age of invention, right? That the age of invention was the 19th and 20th centuries, where everything from the phonograph to the telephone to wired technology to electricity are invented. Innovation, the age of innovation, is the sort of the latter half of the 20th century into the 21st century, which the greatest leaps in technology, is what he says, the greatest leaps in technology and societal organization are not coming from inventions, but they're coming from innovators, people who take the ideas that are already present and refine them. Great example, Steve Jobs doesn't invent the computer, but he makes the computer like this. And so that's the age of innovation, bringing about changes. Now, you need imagination to be innovative, but the question is, how are you enacting your creativity in the world? And I want to, there's some examples that come from sort of the world of design thinking that make, that employ innovation. So these are a pair of glasses, eyeglasses, and this again is part of Matt Bloom's work. These eyeglasses were designed in collaboration with medical doctors who serve in countries that don't have a regular medical service. And so, how do you, people who have difficulty seeing and need eyeglasses and need regular checkups, how do you make sure that though they can see and keep up with their prescriptions and be in tune? You can't fly in a medical team every other year and for people. And these glasses are particularly designed for children whose prescriptions may change at a regular basis. And so these doctors went to a company I'll talk about in a little bit and said, you know, here's our problem. We need glasses that can change regularly, but we can't do prescription glasses in the ways that we do it in other countries. So how do we do this? And so collaboratively, what they come up with is a set of glasses that whose lenses are empty. They're void in the inside, and there's fluid in these tubes. And you essentially put the glasses on the child and you inject the fluid into each lens until the child says they can see. And then you got glasses. It's certainly a lot cheaper than what I'm wearing. But the idea is simply, it's an immediate problem. We're not inventing glasses, we're innovating them. And they're trying to make a positive difference in the world. So this is a wonderful example of that. There are a couple of others here. I think many of us know the story of Velcro, inspired by briars and the hooks on briars. And this is an innovation and invention to solve the problem of space travel and how do you keep stuff stuck down in a weightless environment. The inspiration comes from nature in that regard. And then how do you create the interface that can do multiple things, a selector without having to type a whole lot. The mouse itself is a way to do that. So these are all sort of innovations, and there are tons of others. You know, we live in a world of innovation where people are always making leaps and strides. So that's the concept of innovation. Why does innovation matter when you're talking about making decisions and being discerning? Because innovation requires you to think in a new way about your current situation, or said differently, it involves a new way of thinking and a new way of seeing the world in your own experience. And so, and this is another example, again, coming from Dr. Bloom, that would be really relevant to what we're talking about. So let me see what I mean. Let me see if I can help you understand this here. So on the left here is a cartographer's map of the Great Sandy Desert in Australia. This is a map of a patch of land that is featureless. It is just sand and rocks. And so what you have is the longitudinal and the latitudinal lines, the degrees, and any possible design features. Pretty straightforward. This represents one way of viewing that patch of land. This patch of land, could have people living on it, but that's not on this map. It could have certain features that are being overlooked as a result of this particular map and this cartographer's view of the map. But here's the same patch of land on an Aboriginal map. This is a map that was created by the people of that land. And it's the same spot, but on this map, you see where the river is. On this map, you see the encounters with spiritual spirits and deities. You see here in the bottom, a place where the divine is encountered. The places of meeting, the places of intersection, the places of engagement. It's the same dirt and rocks, but with incredibly rich meaning and a way to view the journey and view the world in which they live. And so why does this matter? It matters because it involves reimagining. And for many of us, discernment and taking the next steps or taking different steps or taking a different position in life means that we have to be willing to see a different view of our life. There's one way to view the world, and we've always viewed it that way. And we need to be exposed to seeing the world differently. Notice, I'm not making a valuative assessment about either one of these, right? You know, I know my 6-year-old would enjoy the Aboriginal map because of all the colors, and she would deride the other. But what we would, seeing through other perspectives is not a valuative assessment. It's not better than, it just simply helps us to view differently our journey. And so being exposed then allows us to reimagine. And then once we begin to reimagine, we can begin to wrap resources around what we're imagining to see and educate ourselves. Can we do the thing that we're imagining? But so how do you see yourself? How do we see ourselves through other lenses? What happens all the time, if you're in any sort of community, if you're in any sort of relationship with someone else, whether that's friends, a significant other, they may speak to you about your gifts. They may speak to you about your abilities. Of course, I'm thinking of this in a positive light. Sometimes they say things to us that we don't want to hear or are not healthy for us. But for a lot of us in healthy relationships, they help us to view our cartographer's map of our life in a way that boils it down to, well, but what about that important experience or that job? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That exposure helps us to see our own lives differently, and then hopefully helps us to reimagine in a way that is particularly helpful for us. And so I offer that because where we're about to move to, where we're going in this presentation, is really ultimately about helping us to see ourselves differently with the resources that we have and right where we are, and being able to make those directions. I have one more thing I want to say, and then I'm going to pause and give an opportunity for you all to feedback about sort of imagination, innovation, and design thinking. I want to take the company called IDEO, and you can visit their website at IDEO.com. IDEO is a human-centered design company. They coined the term and the market on using design thinking to solve problems. So IDEO was the company that helped to design those glasses. IDEO helped to design the first mouse for computers, particularly for Apple computer. And IDEO has done a lot of the products that we come up with are often shipped over to IDEO for, what do you think? Is this really innovative? Is this creative? Is this, I'm thinking you'd be surprised the number of products that IDEO has been behind in terms of creating. If you visit their website, there's a wonderful clip from Nightline about how IDEO works. And that's really helpful because what IDEO offers is an operational model that centers on 3 areas: observation, creation, and designing. The way IDEO works is if there's you call them in, they come into an environment or a situation, and they observe. They just look. They look at what's going on. They look at who's there. They look at how products are being used, what products are being used. They do multiple observations. And what they look for are what are called hidden problems, or thoughtless acts, things that the people do and they don't know that they're doing them. A great example of this, and it's in the Nightline video on their website, is if you go to the grocery store and there are cup holders that are part of the shopping carts. That was a simple innovation that IDEO was helped grocery stores be able to unpack because grocery stores in many suburban communities became hubs. So you had a deli, you had a coffee shop, you had a place to eat. All of that was going on in the grocery store. And so what they found just by observing is people would leave their coffee cups because there wasn't, they buy their coffee and then they start walking around, but they'd have to hold it and they didn't have a place to put it. So then when they were done, or they would set it down to grab something and then they'd leave their coffee on aisle 3 and they're on aisle 7, all that kind of stuff. Simple, innovative act, put the coffee holder on the shopping cart. So after they observe, they then create different ideas. And then the ones that they think can work, they design, they try them out, and then observe, and then go through that process again. And so we're going to adopt that model for thinking about discernment and how we examine this question of moving forward. But I'm going to stop here because we're getting ready to do an exercise. I want to stop for a moment and give you an opportunity to talk back. Are there questions, comments, thoughts? I invite you to either put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself or your video and ask a question at that time. So I'll stop here. Good. So, oh, wait. What do I mean when I use the term discernment? I'm going to define that in just a little bit. But so hold on to that question, because we're going to come to that in just a moment. Other than this, I'll just simply say that discernment is a way to make decisions, a way to clarify your decision-making process. So I'll say more about that in a minute. Good question. Okay, here's the exercise. That's not it. This is it. I want to invite you, I'm going to give you a minute, and I just want to prove to you the importance of creativity and imagination as a part of our own journeys. And so I want you to make a list of as many things as you can think of for objects that are used in ways other than they were designed. So let me give you an example. I need a screwdriver, but I don't have a screwdriver. And so I have a coin in my pocket. And that coin, that dime, is just big enough, and I use that dime. That dime was not minted to be a screwdriver. It was minted as coinage to be money, but I used it as a screwdriver. Let me give you another example. An old tire. I could tie a rope around it and throw the rope around a tree branch, and now I've got a tire swing. Tires weren't made to be swings. They were made to be tires on cars. And so I'm going to give you about a minute, and I want you to come up with as many different objects that were designed for one thing, but are used in a way that they were not designed for. All right, clock starts now. Just make a list. Thirty seconds. Ten seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great. Marietta, you're already ahead of the curve. Great. I was going to invite all of you to throw one of your ideas right into the chat there. So plastic container as a planter. Yeah. That's a good one. Are there others? Just throw them in the there. Washboard as a percussion instrument. Absolutely. Spoons as a percussion instrument. Yep. Newspapers being used as coasters. Okay. Magazine as a mouse pad. Yeah. Any others? Candle holder as a vase. Mason jars as cups. Yep. Screwdriver for a staple puller. Yeah, absolutely. Um, uh, Butter knife for a screwdriver. Um, uh, so you get the idea. CDs as art. Yeah. Album covers, although I'm probably dating myself at that point. Um, what's the point? The one is all of us, as I said earlier, all of us are creative. Um, we all have imaginative potential. All of us have some sort of way of innovating. We're not all artistic in that we express our creativity in a particular form, right? That's art. That's art. You know, we're not all musicians. We're not all painters, but we all have some level of imaginative creativity. And what breeds that creativity, what gets that creativity going, is the same thing that causes invention, which is necessity, right? You don't have the screwdriver, or you don't have the stapler remover. So what you do is you find a flathead screwdriver and you get it in that staple and you take it apart, or a fork, right? We don't see that as creativity. We see that as, and that's what's called a thoughtless act. We just do it. We just pick it up and go do it. But even when there are more complex decisions that need to be made and complex innovations, we sit down and we think about, you know, can this work over here? And if possible, how can we make this fit for this particular environment? That same creative process, that same creative energy is something that we ought to be using to work through our decision-making processes in our other aspects of our life. We sometimes belittle that creativity, but that kind of creativity is really important to a decision-making process. And there are many times in which we don't always have the resources that we want to have in order to facilitate a particular goal. But that also requires us to be imaginative and creative. If I don't have all of the resources I want to have, and all I have is what's in front of me, what can I do with that? What am I able to achieve? Sorry about that. We're going to get there. And so here's a different way to view what I just said in terms of limited resources and being able to apply the resources that you have. These are in my office. I am, as I said, an administrator and dean at Wesley. And, but in my office are all of these Lego figures. And I'm known around Wesley as a Lego maniac and one who loves, you know, building and all that good stuff. But I love it because it helps me to think creatively about problems and what do I do with limited resources? How do I apply the resources in different ways? And so each one of these projects, some of which are built by, you know, smaller ones are in this picture here are built by, you know, without necessarily a schematic, but some of them are built with a schematic. You only have the bricks that you have. That's the thing about Legos. You only have the bricks that you have. Now you go back to the store and get more, but the bricks that come in the box are designed to build whatever it is they build. They can also build something else, but you only have the bricks that you have. You only have the limited resource of what you got. Your ability to build is not in question. Your ability to apply the resources in a way that meets the goal is what's really a very broad way of looking at building something in Legos. But here's what happens. Even if I've got that schematic, I can take each one of these models apart and build something totally different with the same resources, if I'm willing to see these resources in a different way. And that's really a refreshing reminder for me as an administrator who often has got limited resources. I've got to take the resources I have and deploy them in a different way. Those resources could be human capital, they could be money, they could be technology or whatever. But if I'm married to the fact that Big Ben or that Saturn V rocket can only be that, and nothing else, then I'm limited to the resources that are in front of me, and I can never move beyond that reality. And so for some of us, we've been duped into thinking that that's the way various aspects of our life can be, and that's just not true. You know, you could, using the metaphor of this Saturn V rocket, these pieces, many of these pieces were custom designed for this particular rocket, but some of them weren't. A lot of these pieces were not. And so I can build a lot of different things out of this if I'm just willing to see these pieces in a different way. That means maybe disassembling all of these and laying them out on the floor and coming up with something new. That's what this sort of innovation work is about. It's about seeing the resources that you have differently, seeing the product differently, seeing the energy differently, and then applying it in a different format. And so I give that as an example because while I am creative in the sense that I'm a trained musician and I play instruments, that is not the fullest expression of my creativity that always works in my administrative work as a dean. But thinking about problem solving and thinking about way of redeploying resources really does work well with these objects and these little bricks that get deployed in different ways. So discernment and the way in which we employ the IDEO model of discerning over our life. So first, as I think someone asked, what is discernment? Discernment is a term that has been often coined in religious circles and is a way of describing the connection between experience, intuition, and a hope for outcome, right? So discernment is an amorphous term, but it's designed, the goal of discernment is to make a decision. How do I make a decision? Do I only make a decision based upon the logical factors? And if so, logic may dictate one outcome, but that may not be the outcome that I am intuiting or feeling. And so discernment is sort of a mix of the experience of logic, but the feeling of intuition with an intended direction in mind. I'm seeking to go in a particular direction, but I'm not just using my logic or what I've done in the past as the source of what I'm going to do next. It's just what I've done in the past is a launching point that I then use to intuit other options. Again, discernment is a very vague term, but it's meant to be a holistic term. It is. If you get the sense that discernment is not sort of a clean-cut decision, then that's what discernment is. It is not a clean-cut decision. It often requires a lot of belief, hope, introspection, direction, guessing. These are all parts of discernment in that way. What this particular slide here is trying to do is actually make a little more concrete what discernment can be for us in making the next step decisions. And so this is an employment of the IDEO model of observation, creation, and design that helps us to inform our decision-making process. So let's get into this just a little bit further here. First, the observation, right? The IDEO model says that we should observe, we should look carefully, we should go out into the world and observe actual experiences, explore thoughtless acts, experience the world as a real world user. That's how IDEO defines the sensory experience, the observation. Um, Further, they say discover and define the problems, the hidden problems, the unmet needs, the thoughtless acts, the unidentified opportunities. You see things from, you observe and you take a look, as I said earlier. What that means for us in decision making is there's a bit of both introspection and observation about the problem or the situation that you're trying to make a decision about. How do your skills, what are your skills? And then how do your skills speak to the situation that you're trying to define? If in this case that I have on the slide here, it's a decision about your own career or your own path or your own direction. So what are your skills? What have you seen? What have you experienced? Where are gaps between what you can do and what you have done? These are important aspects. A lot of self-inspection, introspection, self-examination, which gets you to understand what you're capable of offering and whether or not your current environment is allowing you to express those things. That's the unmet need. And so the sensory experience means taking time. It means being in conversation. It means journaling. If you are a person of faith and faith is a part of your journey and is an important part of your life, then the sensory experience includes the faith journey. It includes, some of your spiritual practices, whether it's meditation or prayer or what have you. Those are the spaces and places where your sensory experience and faith help to inform what you're doing in the world. And so this is a sort of a first entry point, being able to observe, looking at yourself, looking at the unmet needs, looking at opportunities that you otherwise weren't considering because, for whatever reason. Once you've done that sort of introspective work, then you brainstorm, or in this case, this is what the creation phase of the model looks at. You brainstorm solutions to the problem that you are seeking to address. Here, the important piece is to not put any limits on the creative process. What we tend to do is we think of an idea and then we immediately dismiss it because that idea costs too much, or I won't make enough money, or I've never done that before, right? We think of the immediate resolution of the problem. In this phase, you just come up with ideas, all of them. You think through all of them and you allow them, you jot them down, you just go through them. What if I did this? And then you go through their logic to each logical conclusion. If I did this, then I may have to change this job, or I need this skill set. But if I was able to get that skill set, then what would happen here, right? There aren't any ideas, there aren't any bad ideas in this particular phase. They're only ideas, and you allow them to permeate your mind and draw out the implications, and you allow yourself to experience each one of those ideas in the fullness of those ideas, right? Now, every idea isn't going to work, but some of them might be worth exploring. And the ones that are worth exploring are the ones that you build a design around. If I was to do A, B, or C, in plan A, I could do that if I went back to school, or changed a job, or knew someone in this area, right? In the design phase, you're actually, of your life, you're actually asking the question, what are the ways you can marry your passion, your skills, and experience in a way that leads you to your dream vocation, not vacation, vocation. You might get a vacation if you get to your dream vocation. But, how are you able to design a life that sort of goes to the heart of what you identified as the hidden problem? How are you able to design a solution that addresses the hidden problem that you uncovered in your observation? When it comes to making decisions about your own life, the question is there anyone doing what I love that I can talk to? Will they talk to me? Is that an option? Can I see how someone else has designed these experiences so that they can, in fact, show me a way of thinking and a way of being? That's sort of that exposure in a different format. So again, this is just one way of thinking through, because once you've designed something, you try it out, you implement it, you observe, you explore, and then you may have to recreate and redesign or refine. But whether it's a decision that you need to make in your own about your own life, or a decision that you're making as a career change, or a decision you're making as a leader of a team, what this allows you to do is to better and more closely get to a decision about something. And it's that process of getting closer to a decision which discernment seeks to unpack. And so with that, I am essentially wrapped up here, but I want to take an opportunity to open the floor for questions or thoughts or ideas, or questions about what we've discussed. So I want to open the floor. Again, use the chat or unmute yourself, and we can talk. I'm going to put my email in the box or in the chat here. Thanks, Tom. Let's see. When did these insights become available to you in your career? Insights as to what? Insights into discernment, or the decision-making process, or design thinking? Just need a little clarity. In design thinking, yeah. In a previous life, I was, well, not too previous, but before going into administration, I worked for a think tank that did consulting with churches called the Lewis Center for Church Leadership, and was first exposed to Matt Bloom's work in my role as a program director at Lewis Center, and had an opportunity to work with him and listen to his concepts around how design thinking can be employed for religious communities and change. And design thinking now is something that's quite common in a lot of different arenas, being employed in everything from government to business to religious communities. But design thinking, what if the product that we're designing is ourselves? That's my question, right? What if the product that we're seeking to make a positive impact in the world is us, or a new us, or a new way of thinking about our own life? That was my question. So how does design thinking engage that, or unpack that, or unlock that potential for us? And so I've been thinking about that for a while, and this is sort of a rudimentary exercise in that. But I will say that that sort of revelation has been critical in my leadership, in the way in which I view problem solving in the world. A lot of people have heard me say, at Wesley that I reject binary thinking. I don't want to. I don't like a this or that or either or proposition, and so I always want that in a way. If you come to me with an either or proposition, then we're going to have to sit down and collaborate and think about what's the third way or what's the fourth way. Um, and so that's a design thinking model. What's the problem? State the problem, restate the problem. What have we seen? What have we observed? How do we create something different that doesn't lead us to a simple this or that? I think that's how I've employed it in my life. Good question.
Dr. Lee,
Yes.
could I ask you a question? Thank you so much for this. This has really been a great presentation. I'm actually a designer in government. So I basically employ design thinking in my job to help federal agencies kind of do a better job of what they do in terms of system design, et cetera. And I'm actually kind of coming up with, I'm in a term limited position. So I'm coming up against the end of my term. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on next. And I'm very familiar with a lot of the design thinking stuff that you described, and I think that the struggle that I have is how to operationalize it. It's like making it like theory. I understand it, and I totally buy into that idea. It's interesting that you added the intuition piece as a central part of it. I thought that was really cool. But I think the thing that I struggle with is that I feel like I am kind of at the edge of something that is new. And so to be able to find somebody else who's like doing the next thing, I'm not sure that they even exist, And so I don't know how to do that exactly. I've been just kind of fumbling around and, of course, exploring and trying to figure that out. But then, I am coming to that realization that maybe the thing that I want to do doesn't really exist yet or hasn't been, identified clearly.
Right.
So, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are about something like that.
Yeah. So I think on one hand, that's really exciting, right? Being on the cusp of something. On the other is absolutely terrifying. I hear both and of that. But I would say the place to do the observation phase is actually retrospectively. What have I done in the course of my career? How could I view my giftings in the past in a different way, right? How, even the most routinized jobs have aspects of them that could be employed in different ways. And so you're in a unique position where if no one else is doing what I'm thinking about doing, then what are aspects of the life that I had that someone else is doing? And how could I employ that in a different format? One of the other ways that could be really helpful for you is to start talking to a lot of people in a lot of different ways, a lot of different careers, right? Because and I said this in the previous class as well, hearing not just what people are doing, but how they arrived at what they're doing is really instructive for next steps, right? Because some people fall into these incredible positions just because they asked a question and they were looking at something different, and next thing you know, they're in this whole new role. But how did they get there, and why are they getting passion from it, and what's gleaning? So it might be you have to enter a round of conversation partners that help you to both see your own career through them, as well as hearing how they arrived at what they were doing. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So thinking about the process, the journey more than just the destination necessarily.
Correct.
Yeah,
yeah, very good. Others? I think we've got about 4 minutes. So I've put my email address in the chat. So if you want to follow up, I'd welcome a great conversation. I'm right next door to American University, literally. Well, thanks everybody. The the conclusion of the plenary will be at 4:50, and so we've got a few minutes, but I want to say thank you for your time. I really appreciate you engaging with me and this topic. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.